What if you had been saved by the warnings you disregarded? Donnie McClurkin, a gospel legend, experienced precisely that. You won't believe what he disclosed, I promise. At age 65, when most people want to relax and enjoy life, Donnie was confronted with a startling reality. Heart failure was the diagnosis made for him. However, that is only the start. The interesting irony is that he claimed he disregarded God's warning, which came long before the physicians did. This wasn't just a story about illness, I assure you. It was about faith, denial, and the agonizing consequences of not paying attention to God or your body. It rocked Donnie to his core, rocked his fans, and rocked the gospel world. Donnie was well known for having a voice that could touch your heart. However, something sinister was developing behind the scenes, something that even he didn't want to confront. This is where it all began. For no apparent reason, Donnie started to feel exhausted. Even simple tasks like going upstairs made him gasp for oxygen. His feet and legs began to swell. He was exhausted and felt weak. He dismissed it though, like many of us do. He believed it to be a natural aspect of aging or perhaps stress from his ministry. He persisted in pushing. He stated, "I felt God telling me to slow down, to take care of myself, but I didn't listen." It becomes intriguing at this point. Donnie genuinely believed that God was communicating with him during those few peaceful periods rather than through thunderous thunder. He sensed warnings in his spirit, a need to relax and assess his condition. However, he declined. He was too busy preaching, singing, traveling, and helping people. He ignored the signs that were all around him. At that point, destiny took a surprising turn. Donnie went in for a regular checkup after ignoring the symptoms for several months. The physician sat him down after several tests, but he didn't anticipate anything serious. They told him the truth when their expressions became serious. Heart failure. He was struck by the words. It was unbelievable to him. He wasn't the only person who experienced this. Here's the startling bit though. Later, Donnie claimed that he knew this was coming in his heart. It was due to the spiritual warnings he had ignored, not medical symptoms. He stated, "God warned me, but I ignored the signs." And now he had to deal with the fallout from that choice. The diagnosis may have seemed like the worst part. However, what distinguishes this tale? His heart was not the only thing at stake. His religion was at issue. Donnie claimed that he felt everything inside of him shatter when he heard those words. He was afraid. He was ashamed. He had questions about everything. He said, "Why me, God? How could this have happened to the same man who had helped millions of people through their suffering and who had spent decades preaching healing?" The most absurd thing is that Donnie remained silent despite this horrifying diagnosis. He didn't immediately notify everyone. It was all on him. He didn't want to appear helpless. He didn't want to let those who thought he was tough and unflappable down. But he was breaking on the inside. There was more to this narrative than heart failure. It has to do with spiritual failure. It discussed how even the strongest people can stumble and how ignoring a warning's faint voice can have loud repercussions. Donnie had a long way to go. Indeed, what followed would plunge him farther into a battle for his spirit as well as his body. Donnie's life didn't simply slow down after receiving the news. It ceased. It all seemed to be a blur. Doctors were discussing heart damage and ejection fractions, while the man who had once stood on stages and raised millions with his voice lay in a hospital bed wired up. At first, he didn't even comprehend half of what they were saying. He only knew that his heart wasn't functioning properly and that he might not live if he didn't make changes right now. The calm in that room wasn't simply silent. It was weighty, and he spent days in the hospital. He began to reflect at that point, back to all the times he could have slept. He recalled all the times he felt God speaking to him. Take care of yourself. However, he didn't. He continued to prioritize his ministry over his well-being. God's work must come first. He persuaded himself. Now, however, while he lay there on that bed, he came to a profound realization. A vessel that is empty cannot be used to serve. Donnie finally lost it one day while he was by himself in the hospital room. It was just him and God, and no one else. According to him, "Lord, I'm scared." You never expect to hear someone like Donnie McClurkin say that. This time, however, was different. There was nothing that fame, skill, or a stranger's prayer could change for him. He came to the realization that he needed to confront himself for the first time. He has dedicated his life to assisting people in overcoming their suffering and battling their demons. However, he was now looking directly into the eyes of his own weakness and fear. Crowds and concerts were no longer the focus. It was a matter of survival. How did I let it get this far? He continued to ask himself. He reflected on the years when he neglected his blood pressure, skipped checks, traveled too far, ate very little, and slept very little. He believed he was strong, yet strength without judgment can lead to one's destruction. Then followed the unexpected turn of events. Change your diet, the doctor ordered him to do as he began treatment. Get more sleep. Take these pills daily. Donnie made a daring choice. He didn't want to be dependent on drugs for the rest of his life. He desired spiritual as well as physical healing. He believed that he had let himself, his loved ones, and the God he served down. However, something else started to rise even at that low place. I hope, he concluded, maybe this was God's mercy, not his punishment. Everything changed with that one line. Perhaps this illness served as a wake-up call for him. Perhaps this breakdown marked the start of something new. He then made a choice that would influence everything that happened after that. He would not pass away in that hospital bed. He would fight. However, this combat would not take place on a stage with music and lighting. It would be selecting veggies over junk food at the dinner table, in the quiet spots, walking slowly, one stride at a time, on the treadmill in his room, pleading with God, not as a preacher, but as a man attempting to live. He had no idea that an unexpected person would soon enter his life, someone who would completely upend his entire path. She was not well known. She was not a member of the church. She was a quiet, gentle woman named Maya, and she was a nurse at the rehabilitation facility where Donnie was transferred following his hospitalization. At first, she didn't know who he was. He was only a middle-aged man recuperating from heart failure, Mr. McClurkin to her. However, there was a calmness, tranquility, and kindness about her spirit that Donnie hadn't experienced in a long time. Maya would check on him every morning. However, she inquired about more than just his medication and blood pressure. She questioned him about his true feelings, his dreams, and his fears. Donnie initially responded in brief sentences while maintaining his vigilance, but he opened up gradually. He revealed to her things he hadn't even mentioned in sermons or interviews. Things about loneliness and how, despite his success, he still felt empty some nights. How his childhood traumas had never completely healed. How he occasionally felt that no one truly noticed him, despite touching millions of people. And Maya paid attention. She did nothing else. Just be there, without preaching or quoting scripture. It was the most subdued type of healing. You know, I've been singing about healing all my life, but I don't think I ever let myself receive it, Donnie said her one day as he was taking his time moving through the center's garden in an attempt to regain his strength. He was more affected by that moment than by any diagnosis. He had forgotten how to save himself since he had been so preoccupied with saving others. Months passed. Donnie's physical strength increased, but so did his emotional and spiritual fortitude. He began documenting and praying in a fresh way from his suffering, not just from a pulpit. She never left his side in Maya. She pushed him to eat better, think more clearly, and, most all, live a more honest life. He would no longer act tough when he was weak. Don't hide behind the ministry any longer. However, the next twist appeared just as things were beginning to feel calm once more, and it arrived quickly. Donnie's manager called him one evening. There was a chance to be the star of a significant gospel tour abroad, a huge resurgence, lights, cameras, millions of fans, everything he had ever imagined. In an instant, the old world began to draw him back. Was he prepared? The question was, would he be able to return to that life without losing the new him? He discussed it with Maya. Just make sure you don't return to the stage if it costs you the man you finally became off of it, she replied, glancing at him. Her words played repeatedly in his head like a tune. Now he was at a fork in the road. Notoriety or tranquility? Praise or recovery? To be honest, he had no idea what decision he would make. Donnie sat by himself in his hotel room the night before the tour was scheduled to start, gazing at the suit that was spread out on the bed. The gold trim was specially crafted, the sort of outfit that shouted gospel royalty. There were tickets, welcome cards, and flowers all over the room. Everybody was waiting, but he felt quiet inside. Donnie, reaching the window, he gazed out at the bustling city. The sound of his own voice echoed in his mind. He had been singing those tunes for years, songs that had helped people get better, songs that inspired people to shout, cry, and believe. However, they felt aloof tonight for some reason. Reaching for his phone, he called Maya. As though she had been waiting, she responded softly. When he said, "I don't know if I can do this," after a long silence, she answered, "Then don't." He was struck more forcefully by those two words than by any applause. He didn't leave, neither to the first nor the second night. The media exploded. There are rumors. Some claimed he was ill once more. He suffered a breakdown, according to some. Donnie didn't bother to elaborate though. He had been justifying himself to those who knew only the surface for far too long. He opted for quiet this time, rather than the limelight. Rather, he resided in a modest home outside of the city, overlooking a peaceful lake and the woods. Not for fame but for independence, he resumed singing at morning, alone on his porch, rather than in front of large audiences. On occasion, Maya would sit with him and they would discuss God, life, love, and healing. It's the version they struggle with in the dark, not the one they perform. Months went by, the world changed, new stars appeared. For the first time in his life, Donnie wasn't seeking anything, so he didn't mind if his name stopped making news. He received an invitation to speak one Sunday morning from a nearby tiny church, a room full of individuals in need of hope. No cameras, no expectations. Without a choir or a suit, Donnie got up and told them the truth. "I used to believe that God desired my strength, but now I realize that he desired my honesty," he stated. There was quiet in the space. Some of them sobbed, as though her soul had been anticipating those words. One woman gave a profound nod. That was the end of it. Donnie did not vanish. He simply changed. He continued to sing, occasionally to the woods, occasionally at weddings, and occasionally in churches. He created a book about identity and the type of healing that doesn't happen in front of a crowd, rather than music. And gradually, people realized that Donnie McClurkin stayed true to the gospel. He entered his own self. He discovered love in peaceful mornings and meaningful chats rather than in loud confessions. Silence, rather than stage lights, gave him faith. And he discovered serenity by finally letting go of everything that made him feel like he had to earn it, rather than by receiving accolades. At last, the man who used to sing Stan had mastered the art of sitting motionless. He ultimately found the place he had been looking for, home within himself, not because he gave up,